So what I'd like to do is have this is Spencer Burke, Kim Sheehy, and Loren Feldman. Just do a very brief introductions of themselves, and then why are they interested in what we're doing with Evergreen? Why are they passionate about what you're doing in building your Evergreen companies? So can I start with you, Spencer?
Sure. I've been in the financial services industry for 50 years, basically, and currently I'm involved as a principal in a family office. It's a multifamily office in St. Louis with clients across the country. And through that work and some of my past work in investment banking, I got involved with teaching a course in family business at the Olin Business School at Washington University. And through that, I came to learn of Tugboat. And I must say, it's been fascinating for me to experience the kind of presentations such as Jay made, Greg yesterday, and the others. It's just a totally different feel, and I bring the experience back to my office and share it with my partners, and we share it hopefully then with our clients. So it's been a great experience.
Thanks, Spencer. Kim?
I'm Kim Sheehy. I work at Fidelity Family Office Services. I've been there for 18 years, 14 of those years really working with family offices and wealthy families, helping them navigate non-financial and non-investment related topics. And we're going to go into that in more detail, but really helping them solve problems and learning from other families, the mistakes they can avoid and how they can navigate the landscape of being wealth owners. And we do that in a number of ways. We help make introductions. So we're learning about their challenges, and we know other families who have faced those challenges, and so we're trying to bring them together. We are sharing resources with them that we found valuable in helping other families, and we're doing that through peer-to-peer discussions. So really trying to facilitate open and honest dialogue to help them not make the same mistakes as other families.
I'm Loren Feldman. I cover entrepreneurship for Forbes. It's a lot harder to find privately owned companies doing cool things than publicly owned companies who are kind of everywhere and easy to find on the internet. So if somebody throws an event like this, I'm all over it. I don't think Dave designed Tugboat with me in mind, but if he had, he couldn't have done it too much better. I'm just always looking for great companies with great stories, and for me, this is just priceless.
Thank you. So the topic I want to talk about today is one that I've heard from a number of people said in different ways, and that is if you kind of peel it all back and you get them to kind of sit and relax with you and talk about what, if anything, really, at the end of the day, you're most nervous about or worried about. And often you'll hear, I'm worried about screwing up my kids. That I care more about that, and I'm not sure I'm doing everything I could be doing. I may be doing some things I shouldn't be doing, but there just isn't a lot of folks that are in a similar situation to me around what we're doing in our business. And so, again, this was an idea that we kind of developed together yesterday was, it would be interesting to kind of share what are some of those hard-earned lessons that they have learned either themselves directly or through relationships that they've supported, people they know, that might bring some wisdom to the group on this topic. So I'm going to start with Kim, because Kim actually has a list.
So we developed this list similar to what I made in my earlier comments around, what were all the things we were seeing amongst families? And we really, while every family is different and the solutions that families can take all vary, the reality is that we see a lot of trends amongst families. And so we developed this list to really open that dialogue. And we use this list in roundtable formats to say, what strikes a chord on this list, and let's dig in. We work on facilitating a dialogue, and then inevitably the entire table is interested in what everyone has to say on those particular topics.
And one of the things we talked about was that even though this list was actually generated in conversations with many families, it's as applicable, in many cases more applicable, to you might call the founder, the person who's actually building the company for the first time because of that dynamic. This is some of that wisdom that maybe that founder could really benefit from. So I'll read the list if that's okay. Is that okay with you? Or do you want to read the list?
No, you can read it.
Okay. It says the top 10 ways to assure heartache. The top 10 ways to assure heartache. Number 1, believe that being rich is the greatest thing in the world. Number 2, pretend you're not rich. Number 3, use your skills and networks to protect your kids from mistakes. Heard that conversation before. Number 4, wait for the perfect opportunity to tell your kids they're rich because they don't know it yet.
Like they don't know.
Yeah. Number 5, have your lawyer draft the best prenuptial agreement ever. Number 6, rest well knowing you are an unlikely cybercrime target. Number 7, assume doing philanthropy together as a family is a cure-all.
Oh, God.
I love that. Number 8, buffer your family from your advisors. Number 9, keep your estate plan a secret. Number 10, know that trusts are always a benefit to the beneficiaries. So those are the top 10. So with that, Kim, any one of those top 10 you might have a story about, you might want to share, again, in the spirit of wisdom of the list?
Yeah, I think 1 and 2 go hand in hand in terms of, people usually go one way or the other, and this is what we see, and this is not that, they either, use their wealth and change the way they live. So, they upgrade their homes and they upgrade their cars and they buy things that they can afford now and they upgrade their spouses and they do all these things with that wealth affords them, thinking that those things are going to make them happy. And the opposite happens, right? It leads to mistrust, and it leads to oftentimes addiction issues, and their children have a distorted sense of what being wealthy means. And the reason that happens is that families get away from the values that actually help them get to where they are with that money. And so by disconnecting from the values that got them there, then bad things happen. And then we see the flip side of where people who amass wealth, they live a very modest life, and so they hide the fact that they have this money from their family and from their children, and and that also has negative consequences because you're now instilling values in your children that don't prepare them for becoming heirs. You're almost preparing them to be lottery winners. And we find that 73% of lottery winners end up in bankruptcy and have terrible personal relationships, and that's not what you want for your children. And so the lesson that we learn is that it's not all bad and it's not all good, but it's being intentional with your family and your children about what does wealth mean to you? What are the values that you want instilled in your children? And let that be your guide and your path to achieving it. Again, it's not the same for every family, but if you start with your values and you have this be a part of your conversation with your children, then it ultimately becomes who your children are. I love Jay's I'll have to talk about this later, but he talked earlier about asking his dad what he wanted his legacy to be. And he talked about how he built his company. And I would guess, just hearing his story, that his dad along the way had a plan for what he envisioned for his children and for his grandchildren. And he showed that through the way he lived his life. And that was not unintentional. I would venture to guess. But, I could go on and on with stories probably about families who've done this bad or who have done it good. So I don't.
Yeah,
Which
that's
one
great.
would you like?
Well, we'll stop there just for a moment,
Okay.
put a pin in it, and then Loren, any stories or
Well, I would just
wisdom
say
to
this,
share?
I love the top 10 list, and I think I just realized that it was because I wanted to avoid all those issues that I decided to become a journalist. It's worked out very well.
But you had that funny story about Chris Rock. You want to talk about that or another one?
Sure. Well, I saw, I can't remember where it was. It might have been on a talk show. Chris Rock was talking about how he relates to his kids, and his response was basically, "Are you kidding me? I have nothing in common with those kids. They're rich kids." And I think it kind of sums up the issue you're talking about. I also, at one point, I got to know the owner of a fairly large construction company, about $100 million a year business, who waited until his kids were in their 20s, 3 sons, to kind of hold a bake-off to determine who was going to take over running the company. And he set certain ground rules for this bake-off, and one of them was that any of the sons who wanted to take over the company would have to promise to get their spouse to sign a prenup forsaking any ownership in the business. And the one tricky part about it was that his oldest son was already married. So in that case, it was actually a post-nup. And I'm curious what advice you might have given to that family at that point.
That's pretty complex, but maybe we'll just talk about the prenup piece a little bit. I think, that just has a negative connotation and the wrong time to sort of talk about what you envision for your family and their future as they're, especially during the happiest time of their life, is creating a document that is going to govern that. And so if you're already having those conversations with your family and they understand the value of money and they understand your wishes for that money, then having an open conversation with them about what they view as fair. Oftentimes we've seen that the children get to where the parents want to get, and then they go with their wishes to an attorney to draft the best document. And we've never seen it work positively in the other direction, where the attorney comes
the day
in.
before the wedding.
It's not a good idea.
All right, Spencer. Yeah, I know you have a lot of wisdom on this subject.
Well,
What would you share?
I've just been in prenuptial agreement hell the last week. It's interesting, and it was a friend of mine who, this was just sort of a turn of events that came about that's sort of interesting. So we're typically in the position of representing the wealthy family and one of the offspring marrying somebody else that's not as well off and doesn't have the assets that need protection. So if you have the fundamental concept of a family business, certainly if you want it to be multi-generational, is you do have to maintain control of the business, and eliminating control risks is really essential part of what we call hygiene for your success in the future. So in that sense, there have to be ways to protect the ownership and keep it in the family. That being said, I love your idea of people being knowledgeable about money at an early age and can get into these discussions with their eyes open. The reality, though, is that these agreements end up in a lawyer's office, and it becomes the lawyers of one family, and then you talk about uneven bargaining power. Right. And in this case, I was representing a friend whose daughter was going to get married into a very substantial family business and the like. And it was just an awful situation because neither of the kids were involved in the discussion. It was just the battle of the lawyers, and it turned out and you can, I said to my friend, I said, as it related to her daughter, I totally get the idea that they want to protect the family business. On the other hand, there has to be fairness in terms of the other party, in terms of what I call the it's sort of a bad term, I guess, spoils of the relationship. Two people happily married, they both contribute to the success, and you can't. And I was arguing in his favor. Your daughter cannot be deprived of whatever that is, but it doesn't. mean that she's part of the other family business. So I think all these things are really educational opportunities, and they're usually done too late, would be my experience, and put off too long.
For sake of time, I want to move off the subject. I think that's helpful. But so Spencer, just more generally, what would be your general advice and wisdom to folks with their children?
Well, I think age-appropriate discussions are what's required, and I think better communications. And I guess the big insight that I've had is that the kids observe the parents, and no matter what the parents think about whether they're rich or not rich, they behave in a certain way. And the kids pick all this up. And so they have their own expectations, and they can go in a variety of directions. And I think again, age appropriate, I think the kids need help in understanding what the situation is, and it's age appropriate, and it's just in time. So the conversation about, how much money does the family have, that can be pushed off quite a ways. On the other hand, we see a lot of families that push it off so long that and with aging today, the parents are in their 80s, the kids, they're not kids, they're 55 years old. Right. And they have no idea what is coming toward them. If anything, they'd have no idea. And
maybe it's all going to charity, right? They don't even know it.
I think people have this tendency not to talk about this. And I think that's the problem. And I would add an insight that just because of the nature of our business, we meet with the family units without the parents. So we have 50-something clients around the country, 3 households average per family, that's 150 units. Meeting with the kids and talking to them about their situation, not disclosing things that the parents don't want disclosed, that goes without saying, is unbelievably therapeutic, because the kids, I call them kids, they're adults oftentimes, they need help navigating, what the future looks like. I mean, big decisions. And of course, they have a spouse that's not part of the family, and they have issues too. So what I would encourage is getting your kids quality advice away from the parents.
So let me do this very quickly. So your child's 12, and all 3 of you are welcome to answer this. What's an age-appropriate conversation for a 12-year-old? What should you be talking to them about? That kind of sets this pathway of communication towards them being responsible, healthy adults.
Well, I think fundamental things like the importance of education, the importance of quality health care, the importance of great relationships, the importance of purpose.
Kim, would you add 12 years old, 13 years old?
Yeah, I think, again, to Spencer's point, it's age appropriate. I think those conversations even start sooner.
Even before that age.
I feel even my 5-year-old is always watching what we're doing and how we're reacting to situations and making assumptions based on that. And so if you're not clear about what your values are, and you can't align how you feel about money to those values, then it doesn't matter what you teach them. They won't have that good relationship with it. And so when you're 12, I think of a 12-year-old as we're not just having the money talk with them at 12, right? We're having other talks with them at 12. And so, I have a 13-year-old, and so it can't be a talk, right? It can't just be a one-time thing. It has to be a constant narrative, a constant dialogue. If you understand the technical aspect of money and finances, it doesn't mean you're emotionally ready to handle those things. Same goes with sex. You can't just teach them how the reproductive system works and then expect that they're emotionally ready to handle a sexual relationship, right? And so it has to be a constant dialogue. It has to be a part of how you're raising your children.
So I love that. I think that's exactly right. Is it just, again, because of maturation, at 18, would you maybe have a different conversation, assuming 13, right? Versus maybe 25?
So we're definitely not a believer in our firm of doing exposing portfolio management theory to a 13-year-old. That's not productive. And there are people that do that, by the way. So or teaching them how to start a company. I think that's kind of neat, but the reality is, what I think is great when you get to be college age is the budget, and that's something we've had a tremendous luck with.
Thank you for saying that, because I think for many of us, particularly who are kind of made from nothing, we probably had budgets. I had a budget in college, otherwise I would have no food 2 weeks later. So
Well, sometime when you're at that stage, I remember those days well, where your budget's really your bank account. What's left in it? You didn't have this.
you're
You
down
don't
to
have you didn't-
$1 slices of pizza for every meal, right?
But I think a budget of what it takes to live in college, and I think it's also good to point out what college costs. They're not paying that, of course, but I think those numbers are kind of staggering. The most effective budget is for young married couples, presenting them with the budget that is required to live like their parents live. That is a staggering number.
Wow.
And so you got to have them relax. You don't want to upset them too much. But if you project out 3 kids, and you talk about the cost of education, the numbers literally are, and very wealthy offspring of very wealthy families cannot afford to live like their parents. That's a reality. And that's a good thing to know sooner rather than later, because otherwise the assumptions of, hey, we can be just the way they were. And you've got to say, what are you going to contribute?
Right.
How can you be productive? It's not all about, if you want to do that, you've got to be productive.
Right.
What is it going to be?
And one thing, for sake of time, I think I heard Spencer, you say purpose is so important. Purpose is not only important to your employees and all the people you're working with, but for your kids to deeply understand the purpose of your business is very important. And to start developing an appreciation for that early in their lives, which is sometimes I think it's a hard conversation, because I know my kids, I try to talk to them from time to time, and they just kind of want to talk about something else or nothing at all, right?
But their learning experience in school, where they're having challenges and everything, and it all comes down to purpose and how you want to coexist with other people, and those things are life lessons, and the more of those, the more conversations, the more involvement the parents have, not to a fault, but with the kids, is all good.
If I could come at that from a slightly different direction, I have a daughter who's out of college, a son who's heading into a senior year in college, and starting with the recession, which kind of hit them hard. They were more acutely aware of what was happening in the world than I would have expected back then, and even since then, I feel as though they've seen a lot of the dark side of capitalism. It's really had an impact on them. And I've seen it through their eyes and through their friends' eyes. And a lot of them have serious questions about the way we do things here. And I would just say, you guys in this room may not realize how important the example that you're setting really is to this country.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap up in just a minute, but since I have Loren, I've got you here, I do want to ask a question, and it's on a different topic, but we'll just digress for a second. So many evergreen companies, I don't think, actively look for kind of publicity through things like Forbes or the other major magazines, but some do, and that would be of service to them. Could you just explain a little bit kind of what's going on in the media world? Because it sure seems like they like bright, shiny objects like Elizabeth
How much time do we
Holmes.
have?
You got a minute.
50 seconds?
Yeah. and then just you personally, if somebody would like to engage you, how is it through a really expensive PR firm? Is that the path to success, or is there some other way to make?
Judging from the laughter I heard, I think people know that's probably not the path to success. If you could see my inbox every day, the number of emails I get from public relations people who have clearly not taken even 10 seconds to try to figure out what I might be looking for. The question I think you're kind of asking to some extent is, what am I looking for? What gets me interested? And it's a tough question to answer, because what I'm always looking for is something I haven't seen before. So it's hard to say exactly this is it. Coming to a place like this, I hear a lot of things that I haven't heard before, and that's why I'm here. But it's a tricky conversation, because I find a lot of business owners may not fully appreciate what they do that's different. They know what they do very well. They don't have it in context. they don't necessarily know what to pitch me that I would find interesting. So it does take a conversation, and I think that kind of leads to the answer to the public relations question. If you are trying to share your message, I think it's much more effective to try to build a relationship than to shoot out a press release. And if there's somebody you're trying to reach, it's worth getting to know them personally, individually, try to figure out what it is they're looking for.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, that was our panel for this morning. Thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this with me.